All right, we're a couple minutes late here, so we're going to start the committee of the whole meeting for Tuesday, December 9th. Please call the roll.
Alderman Stralchuk?
Here.
Alderman Talaco? Alderman Meyer? Alderman Hancher? Alderman Bach?
Here.
Alderman Parrish?
Here.
Alderman Bratt?
Here.
Alderman Gebhardt?
Here.
And Mayor Nurbin.
Here. First up, we have approval of the meeting minutes from November 11th.
Move approval. Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments, corrections? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Minutes are approved. First up, we have one of two discussion items. The first is RevPAR Incorporated Hotel Development Feasibility Analysis Phase 1 Consultation Report out. Director Towson will kick it off, and then we've got our consultants online to add some color as we go.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Our representatives from RevPAR are present tonight. I do just want to kick off the meeting by reminding all of us, as well as the public who may be listening, that this was an analysis that we chose to proactively pursue as a result of market analysis that we did of commercial activity on the Port Washington Road corridor. The findings of that was that the commercial corridor is healthy, and we have to continue to look for ways to maintain its health. One of the several recommendations from that analysis suggested that there could be an opportunity for an upper scale, smaller sized hotel. And was there the potential to use that type of development as a catalyst and transformative redevelopment of several sites that were identified in the market analysis? Beyond that, though, we asked the consultant to look at the entire corridor to consider the redevelopment of any site and the feasibility of the development. And that contract was executed by the Common Council. It included multiple components. We crafted that contract to allow for the council to review the results of each phase so that we could be efficient and cost effective with that contract. So tonight, Chris Selke and Chris Lloyd from RevPAR International are here to present the results of phase 1. So they're gonna speak to the presentation here tonight that was also included in your packet. I'll kind of man the PowerPoint, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers and any further dialogue. We did consult with RevPAR as well about one remaining component of the scope that may be of interest, which is to consider a hotel room tax. And they've drafted a draft, proposal on what that policy analysis could include. So that's something that if the council wants to discuss further with RevPAR tonight, we could continue that dialogue and advance that portion of the scope of services. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris. And Chris, thank you both for being here tonight. And we are anxious to hear the results of this phase 1 analysis.
Great. Thank you, Kim. Can everyone hear me? Perfect. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you very much for taking the time to meet with us this evening. And with that in mind, Chris and I are going to walk through, it's a relatively short slide deck that summarizes our initial analysis. It's about 15 slides, but if we could just flick to the next slide, Kim, so we get to the agenda, that'd be great. We're initially going to walk through the site analysis that we conducted. We were provided a total of 12 sites within the corridor to evaluate, and we shortlisted a series of sites and then further shortlisted them down to a kind of a top 2, but initially started with the top 5. Then we're going to review competitive supply that includes both within Mequon itself, but also the region, more specifically the area of North Milwaukee. Finally, we're going to talk a little bit about market performance of those hotels that we looked at that were deemed competitive. And we looked at it both locally, regionally, also looking at the city of Milwaukee as well, and then also did a national comparison as well. And then finally, we're just going to talk through with our initial concerns for the project and proceeding and what the next steps would be. And just as Kim had noted earlier, what we had done is our initial phase one of the project, we kind of stopped once we got to this initial component here and wanted to present our findings to you before we proceeded down with the next phases, because at this point, we are a little concerned with the market conditions in terms of the project being market supportable or financially supportable as well. So with that in mind, we'll start off with the site analysis, which is on the next slide. Thanks. So you can see here, these are the 5 sites that we looked along the Port Washington Road corridor. And we focused really on the sites that were the large enough sites. And Kim, please confirm here, but we had about 12 sites in total. And one of the initial phases that we did was we kind of culled down the sites that were really too small to consider and focused on these 5 here in our analysis. Can we go to the next slide? From here, we actually created a site matrix where we ranked all of the individual a series of metrics for each of the 5 sites that we initially shortlisted to kind of create a best and final list here. And those included the following different metrics: ease of overall development, basically parcel size, sufficient utilities, just the general conduciveness to actual hotel development. Next was proximity to area food and beverage outlets. While hotel guests may have a food and beverage outlet within the hotel, they also prefer to have the opportunity to be within close proximity to alternative food and beverage outlets. The other proximity was to retail amenities, ability to go out and go shopping, pull up necessary essentials or purchase necessary essentials, those types of items. And then we also looked at, and really very importantly, looked at corporate demand. So where would people that were staying in the hotel be coming to visit? Are there large corporations? Are there manufacturing facilities nearby? Things of that nature. And then the next one is leisure demand generators. So this can be everything from visiting friends and family to, if you look at other parts of the state, like in the Wisconsin Dells, where they've got large scale water parks that are large leisure demand generators. Or in this case, we've also got the university, the nearby university, and then also another common leisure demand generator in a market like this, suburban market like this, is also youth sports as well. Surrounding ambiance as well is another one. Current utilization of the site, visibility. Visibility is one of those things that used to be really paramount back in the day. You want it to be as close to the side of the highway as possible, but the advent of GPS and internet advertising has really moved that metric down on our ranking. Then we also looked at the zoning, what was currently allowed and what wasn't allowed. And then finally, the access to I-43 as well. So with those in mind, we ranked all of those items, and you can see here on this site matrix, we put the most important ones, we assigned them a 3, and then the least important ones we assigned a 1. And then from here, we ranked each individual site within the total of 5, with the highest score being the highest ranking site. And as you can see here, site 4 and 5 were very, very close. They both scored high, above 90 out of a total potential of 100. So they did quite well. Sites 1, 2, and 3 were definitely inferior to site 4 and 5. Again, with the largest drivers for those being their proximity to food and beverage outlets and retail amenities, given they're a little bit closer to the interchange where a lot of those larger strip retail centers were. With that in mind, we can go to the next slide, Kim. The next thing we did was we reviewed the overall submarket, Milwaukee North submarket, North Shore submarket. So we looked at hotels, really everything north of Milwaukee, and looked in 3 specific little submarkets, which were Glendale, Brown Deer, and Grafton. We also looked in Mequon as well. But as we pointed out in our memo, the 3 existing hotels in Mequon are of mid-scale or lower rating or economy rating, whereas the goal for this project was really to focus on upper upscale, which is, in layman's term, is more of a 4-star rating. And the hotels that are currently in Mequon are really the 2.5 to 3-star rating. And so we tried to identify the hotels that were closest to that 4-star rating. As you can see from the list here, Not many of those are meeting that 4-star criteria either, but these are the most proximate hotels that are in that upscale category, or in some cases, mid-scale, upper mid-scale category. These are, again, defined terms within the hospitality industry. But again, looking at a simpler star rating, I would say most of these hotels are in that 3-star, the 3-star rating. So we've got a total of about 1,000 hotel rooms here, 1,000 in total, spread across these 3 various submarkets. As you can see, also various opening dates, with a handful of them opening more recently, but the vast majority of them do have some tenure in the market, with the newest hotels being in Glendale, and then also the Town Place Suites up in Grafton as well. Can we click to the next slide? So this next slide shows the performance of each individual submarket. So what we did was we collected occupancy, average daily rate, which is also known as ADR, and RevPAR, which our firm is named for, is an industry term, which is revenue per available room, which is basically how much revenue are you getting per night for each individual room, regardless of whether it's occupied or not. The average daily rate is really what you're paying, obviously paying for your room rate, and then occupancy is the simple occupancy of the hotel. And as you can see here, from 2022 to 2024, the market occupancy for the Glendale hotels has declined by about 4 points, going from 59 to 55%. At the same time, the ADR has actually increased. The ADR has gone up from $123 to $131. But that important metric of RevPAR, which is how much money are you getting per available room, has actually stayed flat. So while the rate has gone up, the occupancy has gone down. So effectively, the hotels are getting the same amount of revenue that they were in 2022, in 2024. And then if you look into 2025, this is a projected year-end number that we're working with. So we've taken the year-to-date performance through October and then estimated the last 2 months of the year. And you can see we expect it to decline even further, with occupancy eroding an additional 3 points from year-end last year, and rate, most importantly, rate declining pretty significantly by almost $12. So in the end, RevPAR has declined to about $62 as well. So that's also not necessarily a positive factor here, as we're seeing market performance decline. Can we click to the next slide, Kim? So Brown Deer, a little bit more of a mixed performance in this one, but again, you can see a similar trend here. Occupancy levels are below 50%, so definitely on the low side, and room rates are even lower. This is likely a result of the hotels being a little bit older. The most recent hotel opening in Brown Deer would be the Candlewood in 2008, but the balance of that supply had opened up some as early as 1990, but other hotels are also in the early 2000s. So their performance is an indicative of a little bit of age, but also just the market conditions as well. And you can see that room rates are down, pretty significantly year to date again, and occupancy is actually bumped up a little bit in 25. But again, we're looking at a RevPAR of roughly $43, which is almost $20 below the Glendale hotels. So if we can go to the next slide. The last one is the Grafton market, which is probably representative of the newest hotels in the market. And so their performance is actually the strongest of all of those 3 submarkets that we've seen. And they sit at the very north end of the Port Washington corridor. And what we've got here, as you can see, occupancy was quite strong, actually, back in 2022 and 2023 at 68%. But into 2024, occupancy declined precipitously by about 7 points and has stayed down again in 2025. The concern here for us is we saw some positive rate growth as well in this market, which was great. But again, into 25, ADR has declined again. And so now we're seeing RevPAR at $78, which again is down below 2022 levels. When we were to, can we just click to the next slide real quick, Kim? So this is the total market. So this is all 3 of those sets combined. So this is really a macro look at all 1,000 or 1,082 rooms in the market, or the defined market. And you can see that ADR has declined from $118 to $116 over the course of the last 4 years, and occupancy has declined from 56% to a projected 50% and RevPAR has declined by roughly $9, going from $67 to $58. Again, so a long-term trend of seeing some declines, and comparatively, just from a national perspective, and then also from an overall Milwaukee, or downtown Milwaukee perspective, most of the markets have still been recovering. Obviously, we had the extreme declines of COVID in 2020 from 2019 levels, but you can see they've gradually made some increases, but now we're starting to see some declines again. And this is different from what we're seeing in the rest of the national markets, which are either flatlining or still seeing some level of growth. So can we click to the next slide? So here's probably the most critical item that we're seeing here. And putting this as a backdrop, is we've really just been talking about top line revenue. There are a number of issues, as I think everyone knows, with inflation and the overall cost of doing business, whether it's labor, guest supplies in the hotel, simple things as linen, and then just overall operating costs for hotels have been increasing at a very rapid rate, far above what we would consider a typical inflationary rate of roughly 3%. And as you can see, for the last 4 years, if we look at the total competitive market, its revenue per available room is actually declining by 4.5% per year. So when you account for those two factors of where you've got inflationary, your costs are going up and your revenues are going down, these are not necessarily healthy hotel markets, in our opinion. Can we click to the next slide real quick? So lastly, we just looked at, for a comparison perspective, what we did was we looked at the overall competitive market, downtown Milwaukee, and then the total United States. And as you can see, back in 2022, the competitive market was actually performing better than downtown Milwaukee. Slightly, it's modest, but we're performing better. Then into 23, downtown Milwaukee's surpassed them. And then into 2024, they went significantly past them and are now back in line with what the national averages are for occupancy. But you can see that market occupancy is down, again, below 50%, whereas downtown Milwaukee is at 62%. So can we click to the next slide, which just highlights the ADR differential. So this is the overall ADR differential, again, between all three markets that we looked at here, the competitive market, downtown Milwaukee, and the US national average. And you can see that obviously the competitive market trails the downtown Milwaukee market, which is to be expected. Most suburban markets do trail their central business districts, but we're also trailing behind the US as well, just to give you a little bit of an idea of where the differential is here. But we're trailing the US market down by about $30. And the last slide is on the differentials here is on a RevPAR basis. So you can see we're about 60% of the national average in terms of performance. And this goes across all hotel classes. But we're only at $63, whereas the nation's at $100, and downtown Milwaukee is at $105. So if we come to this next slide here, these are our primary concerns with the Port Washington corridor. Overall market demand has not recovered to pre-COVID levels. Across the United States, they certainly have. Across downtown Milwaukee, they have, and then some of the other submarkets in Milwaukee as well. They have also recovered to pre-COVID levels, but market demand continues to erode in the North Shore market, particularly into 2025. The next one is the next concern that we have is that there's a limited number of market demand drivers along the Port Washington Road corridor. And so where we're focused on here is large corporations, industrial, office space, industrial space or manufacturing space that may have needs for hotel room nights. It really is a residential community, and the residential demand is what we see in this market. There may be some other limited components of demand that are related to construction that could be sourced into this market as well. But from our perspective, we had concerns that we would have to be pulling demand from other markets and make ourselves an attractive destination in order to get demand there. The last critical component that we have some concerns with here is really related to the room rates themselves. And as you can see, the room rates have been declining, but the room rates below $120 are not necessarily indicative. And then couple that with, a lower occupancy of 50% are not necessarily indicative of what it would take to drive a return for a new development project on this, certainly of a four-star nature. So a four-star hotel in the United States, you're probably looking somewhere north of $200,000 per room to develop. As a kind of an example, this market is only likely going to support something that's much lower cost to develop. So we would certainly probably be more in line with the competitive hotels that we identified here. That would be in that 2.5 to 3-star category from a support perspective. And even then, it would be questionable if we would be able to drive a financial return given the current market numbers. And so at that point in time, once we got to this point, we reached out to Kim and her team and had a brief meeting to kind of outline our concerns with the market before we took the next step, which would have been identifying a product type and generating an actual pro forma for a proposed hotel. Because at this point, there's enough signs for us to indicate that it would not likely be financially feasible at this point. So with that in mind, I think the one last thing where we did see some opportunity, I want to come back to and just discuss where we did see some opportunity or potential opportunity is likely in an extended stay capacity, which would be, if we click back to, Kim, I'm going to ask you to click all the way back to like the third or fourth slide, which had that competitive supply. Oh, it's the fifth slide, actually. I'm sorry. Perfect. These hotels have an interesting development profile. They're called extended stay hotels, but they're basically standard hotel rooms that offer larger accommodations. They also offer small kitchens, and these accommodations can be used for people that are, let's say, traveling with families, and so they have a larger party. They can also be for people that are looking to relocate to a destination and they need a hotel for an extended period of time. Let's say it's 2 weeks, 3 months, while they're finding permanent accommodations. Another use for extended stay hotels in a lot of cases in suburban markets is also insurance business. So let's say, God forbid, there's a fire at a house or a flood or something and the house is not usable. And insurance companies will put up people at these extended stay hotels for long periods of time while their houses are remediated and repaired. So there's a couple examples of these hotels within the market. So the Residence Inn in Glendale is one example. The Candlewood Suites in Brown Deer is another example. And then the Town Place Suites up in Grafton is another example. Those are the three extended stay hotels. The unique thing about extended stay hotels is they have the tendency to pull from a greater radius. People, because they're staying for longer periods of time, they're less concerned with am I next door to the office building that I have to go to my meeting in the next day? Or am I next door to the youth park where the sporting fields are going to be for the next day? These are people that are, effectively living in the community for an extended period of time. So from that perspective, the Port Washington Road corridor would be a little bit more conducive for the development of a hotel like this, because it doesn't necessarily need to be directly adjacent to commercial demand generators and leisure demand generators. So that's something that we talked a little bit about with Kim. But again, the focus of our study was really focused on that 4-star level of hotels. And from where we were sitting, we did not see market support for the development of a 4-star hotel. We also talked a little bit about, with Kim and her team, just some of the overall design and prototypical design of some of these hotels. And understanding that you all have a 2-story height limit currently on the Port Washington Road corridor, almost all of these hotels would require at least 3 to 4 stories in order to make them efficient from a development perspective as well. So that's another item that we talked about, which would be a little bit of a hindrance if we were to go with, again, a prototypical extended stay hotel as an alternative to what was initially requested of us. So with that in mind, I know I've been talking here for about 20 minutes, but I wanted to provide you with a little bit of background and then answer any questions that you may have.
All right, let's open it up for questions from the committee. Alderman Strelchuk.
So I guess my first question is, we're looking for a, like a 4-star hotel, right? And on the list that we've got in front of us currently, I think there's maybe one that could be considered close to a 4-star. What I'm trying to understand is, these markets in nearby communities are, I think, a little different than the Mequon demographic. I think they're a little different than the Mequon safety standpoint. I think Mequon has more food and amenities, which would be close, walkable, short drivable to some of the hotels in the consideration list. So what I'm trying to understand is, like, let's say a Hilton Garden Inn. I'm not trying to, handpick brands and things like that. I'm thinking of my, my business travel, Hilton Garden Inn or a Courtyard by Marriott are typically the two that I look for when I travel. We've only got one kind of in that upper tier of hotels that people would seek out. So I guess my question is, if we built a 4-star, would we pull potentially a lot more from neighboring communities? Why wouldn't we be able to support it? And my third question in line would be, what is the national average bringing to the table that we are missing as a community, just from an understanding standpoint?
Sure. So I think first and foremost, the one of the reasons we selected the hotels we selected is because they're likely to share demand generators, right?
Yeah.
So these communities, I mean, we'll give you Grafton, for example. Grafton is pulling demand all the way up from down from Sheboygan. We uncovered that during the course of our interviews that the Grafton hotels, one of the reasons why they saw their occupancy decline was because there was new supply open up in Sheboygan by one of the existing hotel owners up there, and they shifted some demand from a corporate demand driver that was filling one of their Grafton hotels, and they moved to Sheboygan, right? So there's a willingness to drive, but there's also that, and I think I mentioned that earlier, is that proximity to demand generators. And within Mequon itself, there isn't a significant corporate demand driver, someone that's driving hundreds, if not thousands, of room nights into area hotels. And a lot of that industrial development or commercial development is west of you, in other communities along the North Shore, or it's to the south of you in downtown Milwaukee. So I don't disagree with you in terms of the affluence of the community and the ability to, but unfortunately the community isn't the one that the community is not necessarily always the one that's using the hotel. Visiting friends and family and that type of demand is a relevant demand factor, but it's not one that's going to necessarily support, a Hilton Garden Inn or a Courtyard. I'm assuming that's what you were referencing there, and in terms of a Courtyard.
Sure.
When we looked at overall performance, if we go to the Glendale hotels, they've obviously got access down to that larger mixed-use development to the south of them as well, which has quite a number of amenities. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but they've got a lot of access to amenities. While they're not necessarily directly walking distance, they are very proximate to them as well. But you can see that the performance there isn't necessarily driving, that we're not knocking their socks off here at $120. I mean, from our perspective, in order for one of these hotels to really truly be successful and be supportable with today's development costs, you really need to be the hotel needs to be penciling north of 65% occupancy, if not a little bit higher, in a stabilized year, and having room rates north of $120. And you can see from all three of these markets, no one's able to actually to do that at this point. And so that was the other factor that we were looking at as well, is that there's existing demand generators in this market, but we clearly have an oversupply situation if we've got occupancies for the whole market only not exceeding 50%. for the combined market. I mean, Grafton does a little bit better, but you can see Grafton got significantly impacted as soon as they lost some of their demand generators to the north as well. And I'm sorry, you had a final question, and I can't remember what the third one was.
Yeah, just the driver and other communities and what the driver is for demand and occupancy. You've covered that pretty well in your description.
Yeah, I mean, when we looked in Mequon, and again, we spent some time in the city as well. We also noticed that a lot of the industrial base or some of the larger, not necessarily industrial, but it could be, flex space was west of the corridor, located in the center part of the city or the municipality. And while there's some demand that comes out of there, that demand is leaking into, it's leaking up to Grafton, or it's leaking down to Brown Deer as well. But then when we actually interviewed also some of the hotels to the west of these submarkets as well, and we're trying to determine if there was any other demand from Mequon that was leaking out of one of these three submarkets, and we could not identify any specific demand generators that were leaking into those other submarkets to the west either.
Yeah, when people come to stay in the community, they typically go north to Grafton.
Yeah.
That's the primary area in which they're used. I did a quick spot check, and, the Marriott's going for $129 a night, just south of us. So, I mean, your rates you're pretty much right on base. Again, just a statement to the general public, because I know people are listening to this. We don't have to be everything to everybody. We certainly don't have to build a big hotel if the demand's not here. And, we need to be respectful of our community and what that involves. I've heard through my time in office that people have wanted to, not have to leave the community to have family when they come to visit. Again, this feasibility is a really good study to, try to understand what it looks like to, try to please the residents without, going too big and making it look like something that maybe we just wouldn't have as a fit for our community. So thanks for your commentary on that.
Any other comments? Just following up what Alderman Strelchek said, I've heard similar things from people, but that's why you hire professionals to dig into the details. And just don't do it because a lot of people bent your ear about it for 5 minutes at the grocery store. Alderman Meyer.
I'm not saying we would do this, but do other communities have, subsidize some or have incentives for the hotels or that to move into their community?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways to do this, right? If we were to proceed and identify the amount of a subsidy that would be needed. We've seen everything from development subsidies, and that development subsidy can come in the form of a land purchase, right? Where the land is donated or provided to the developer if it's municipally owned. Other components where we've seen partial ownership, or we've seen a rebate of an occupancy tax is another common way to do it, where effectively the occupancy tax for the municipality is used to support additional development. In some cases, you do see outright ownership of hotels by municipalities and cities. It's probably most common in the form of large convention hotels in major metropolitan areas, where you would see the municipality invest and build a convention center hotel in order to drive economic impact. But there's also plenty of examples where those investments haven't necessarily been very successful either. But there are opportunities, to incentivize people from a fairly minimal level all the way up to whole ownership. It would really depend on what your appetite would be to do something like that.
I think staff needs a couple of overarching decisions from us. One is whether we're interested in proceeding at all on any further on the hotel side. And I'm guessing the answer is probably not, because we've got a consultant that said it's probably not favorable. But we do have another component of this related to the contemplation of a hotel room tax. We do have existing hotels and we don't have any room tax. So maybe we should talk a little bit about that, unless anyone wants to keep revisiting the hotel. Or has any other comments on the hotel before we move on? Alderman Parrish.
Well, I was just going to thank staff and the consultant, Alderman Gephardt, Economic Development Committee. I really like this approach where we had the a la carte and we can kind of veer off here and not spend thousands more dollars. So thank you for that. I was kind of originally leaning towards a room tax, although after hearing about the data, I would be concerned about any financial, it could affect demand further for the hotels we do have. So, just we only have 3 places to stay now. So if they're all going to start charging room taxes because we're making them do it, then that could affect the demand further. I'd rather come up with ways to encourage our existing hotels to reinvest in themselves and raise themselves up a bar and make it a place where our residents would be proud to have their families. So I don't know what that involves, but I think that's probably where I would prefer to go with it. But I wouldn't call it a high priority, and I'm fine moving on from the subject after tonight. So thank you.
Alderman Gebhardt. Oh, I saw you first. We'll get to everyone.
Great.
We've got time.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a couple of comments. First of all, a shout out to the Economic Development Board. They work really hard trying to think of, exploring different opportunities for thoughtful development in our neighborhoods or in our community. This is an area that's located in one of the TIDs in a high visible area that we really are trying to generate some thoughtful and meaningful development that's going to spur, again, some more action along that corridor. And we think there's an opportunity there. And matter of fact, we were a little bit surprised with the data, but that's why you go through this process, is you never know where it's going to lead you to. And it led us to a point where now we've got really good data that we can go ahead and work with. The other benefit for this as well is, that hasn't been mentioned, is city staff was also looking for ways to work on design standards, right? So that we're able to do a better job communicating to developers and putting certain things in certain areas. And that was an area that's certainly going to be taken up in additional discussions in terms of some areas within the Port Washington corridor where we might be able to go ahead and tweak our design standards. The other piece that I'd like to mention is a shout out to RevPAR. I had the opportunity of being part of the kickoff meeting and every meeting during the process. They hit our timeline. They got right to the heart of the data. They came in, they got to the data very quickly. And at the end of the day, we're able to go ahead and come back to us with really meaningful data, even below what they were estimating from a cost standpoint. They hit that mark and said, hey, we've got to have discussions. This is what we've learned, and we're bringing it back to the council here tonight. So a shout out to them, and I'd very much, if we're looking at doing additional studies, I'd be in support of trying to go ahead and continue to work with them. In terms of the room tax, the discussion that we've been having at the Economic Development Board is that when we look at our surrounding areas, and I have no way of confirming this, but at least the thinking is that many of the surrounding areas to Mequon already have the room tax in place. So how are they able to go ahead and, if that is the case, how are they able to charge a room tax and still be able to maintain the occupancies, if you will, or the structure of the hotels in those communities? So, the comment was made that we may be a little bit behind what others are doing. So that was potentially an opportunity for us to look at. And then that could generate some funds for us to, put back into promoting and, people coming to the area as they're doing in some of the other communities. So just throwing out that as, we talk about potentially considering looking at continuing an analysis on the room tax side of things. Okay, thank you.
Alderwoman Talaco.
So my question is, later tonight, we have an ordinance coming before us about the town center, the 3-story commercial row houses. And if I'm not mistaken, was that extend a stay on the 3rd floor that they were doing? or no?
One of the existing commercial buildings on Weston, already built and operating, has some extended stays as part of it. And there are some units suggested as part of the mixed-use commercial building in this mixed-use project as well.
Okay, and I'm asking that because it sounds like we kind of have proactively then have something in the works for this extended stay, which sounds like that was what he was saying was in a need. Originally, when we did this hotel feasibility study, I was the only one that voted against it. I thought we were putting the cart before the horse. I still feel that way today. I feel that our focus on the Port Washington corridor, why a lot of us feel like, you know, a hotel or someplace to stay is necessary. I think we need to focus on that family-orientated luxury of building things for families to come and spend money, whether it be restaurants or indoor playgrounds or whatever along that line, in order to create more of a higher demand. And then along, if we already are kind of including these extended stays in the town center, that kind of hits that need. And I can't remember my last point, so thank you.
So perhaps time for a straw poll, just to drive some sort of general direction for staff. At this time, who's ready to kind of give up on the concept of a hotel for the time being? You know, market conditions could change in 5 or 10 years and we could always revisit it. But at time equals now, who's ready to kind of give up on the hotel for Port Washington Road? Okay. Good, there's some general direction, maybe resounding direction.
Mr. Mayor, if I might. I'm not looking to chase down a hotel, but if a boutique something comes to the table that's of intrigue, I'm definitely don't want to turn my
Someone
nose
could
up to
always,
it.
the private market could always come and bring something forward, but I think it's whether we pursue or, that's exactly the question. Yeah, I don't think we'd say no to the right opportunity.
I just wanted to make sure that straw poll is
Yep.
read correctly from my standpoint, so thank you.
Yeah, it's more of a city initiative led, you know, as a policy. And then on the question of the hotel room tax, who's interested in learning more? We haven't had much discussion on it tonight. And it has been brought up the last couple of years when we've had some discussion at budget time about alternative revenue sources. So it's been kind of kicked around in those discussions. We've never advanced it. I think while we're on the topic, there might be some value in furthering the discussion at least. Alderman Strelchak.
Yeah, I'm open to it. Again, you know, piggybacking on what Alderman Parrish shared, you know, we don't want to raise the rate and then hurt our current hotel population right now, you know, their occupancy, and have them go elsewhere. But, you know, we definitely want to look at what it means, you know, from not only a hotel standpoint, but also, you know, short-term rentals, like maybe like an Airbnb or something like that. I would look to understand just kind of what the policy is, maybe kind of what the going rate is, if it's really worth it to go through a financial exercise. Are we talking 10 grand a year? Are we talking, you know, 30, 50, you know, like what does it mean to us, and what can we really do to, you know, further that? Typically, when those room taxes are taken, it goes back to the community to, you know, reinvest in the initiatives to get people to come to the community, to come and dine in the community, or to come and stay in the community, and to promote some level of tourism. You know, typically a lot of, you know, that is, you know, for some communities, it's a cash flow source. I don't see that for us. I don't see that we have, you know, clearly we can't support a Hilton Garden Inn, you know, based on population and, you know, neighborhood comparables. So, you know, this is probably a smaller amount, but it would be nice to know what the baseline looks like, and then how it relates to like Airbnb and some of those other ones. I know that those have been brought up as concerns within the community, that, you know, the community could be benefiting from some tax dollars in that space as well.
Oh, okay. Oh, we'll go Alderman Bratt.
Oh, please.
Oh, thanks.
Yes, he hasn't spoken yet.
Yeah, so I really appreciate this conversation. I'm reminded of his old statement that opinions without facts are opinions. And, I voted for the hotel study in part because I think our community needs a diverse mix of revenue sources. It cannot just be residential property tax. So, I was a little surprised, but, data is data, and we have to live with that. In the same way, I would argue that we, like my colleague said, that we need to study, know more about the room tax. I think it could be a valuable way to diversify our revenue sources. And so we have facts to match an opinion. So thank you.
Okay, Alderman Parrish.
Pass.
Pass, okay. Alderman Meyer.
I'd be willing to take a look at it. I don't think that, and the one thing for sure, I want to make sure that it wouldn't hurt our hotels or what we currently have here, any of the owners that we have here and the businesses. But, when you take a look for a hotel someplace and it doesn't list on there that, that it's $123 a month and that includes hotel tax, it's not listed that way for it. It just says plus taxes and stuff like that. So, and I don't think that our hotels or the places that we have here advertise saying, come stay with us because we don't have any room tax. I don't think that's a real driving factor in either way on that. So I'd be willing to take a look and do a comparison of what other people are charging for that. And along with Alderman Strelchek, want to see what type of income that does produce in that and the benefits for the city in doing that and promoting other things.
Yep, so good lead in for an opportunity for a straw poll. Who's interested in learning a little bit more about what a room tax might look like? Okay, so you can always choose to have it or not have it, and if you have it, at what level you set it. So it's not super impactful, but so there's some general consensus to move forward there.
So Mayor and Council, I would ask then, the financial component, the financial analysis component of the scope of services that we entered into RevPAR did include a discussion about the hotel room tax. And as I mentioned, there is a draft proposal, to give us a little bit more detail from RevPAR. Do you want to grant authority to move forward with that component of the scope of services, or would you like us back with a little bit more detail and a dollar amount so that we're making sure we're staying within, financial parameters for those expenditures? Again, these costs can be paid for by the TIF. Two of our hotels, two of the three hotels are located in two of the TIF districts. So I think you have the discretion to go ahead and authorize that now, but if you'd like additional information, we can bring that back.
Okay, another straw poll. Okay, going forward under the current scope of services, or the counter to that is who would like to learn more and maybe sharpen the pencil on that. What's that? Remind us what the dollar amount is in the current.
Yeah, we don't have a specified dollar amount, so we'd have to, sharpen our pencil.
Oh, so maybe there is no decision to make. So we'll come back with, I think the answer was yes, but we have to come back with a number and a rough scope to make sure it's in line with what people want. Is that correct? Unless there's a existing line item?
Well, there was an existing line item related to financial analysis in the scope of services for the proposal, which was $10,000. So, that included other economic assessments. So we would have to work with RevPAR to better understand that component of that. Yes.
Okay, why don't we bring that back then?
Okay.
Yeah. Just so we're clear what we're spending the money on. All right. Anything else on the hotel topic? Okay, I think we're good. Right,
Thank you,
staff good?
RevPAR.
Yep, thank you, RevPAR. It's amazing work, and maybe it wasn't the answers we wanted, but it's the answers the data's the data. So thank you very much.
It'll assist us with the zoning regulations as well.
All right, we're going to move on briefly to a short presentation on the overview of the city's new agenda management provider, Civic Plus. So if you're looking for agendas online, you'll notice that the look and feel of the website's changed a little bit. So we're gonna go through that for the benefit of council and the general public. Take it away, Carolyn.
Thank you, Mayor. Council. As the mayor indicated, the city recently moved to a new vendor for housing our agendas, packets, videos, and minutes. So I'd like to begin by showing the public portion of the new website. As you can see here, I'm on the city website. And if you click on agendas and minutes, it brings you right into the Civic Plus listing of current and future meetings. So you can see here it starts with the current meetings for today. You can scroll back and go back to past meetings. You can click here to download any of the agendas and minutes. And we're going to click on public safety. And you can choose to pull up the packet or just the agenda. And there we go. It pulls up the packet. It's the same packet that the council's been used to seeing over the years. Very similar look. If you notice over here at the calendar, you can go back through the years. Staff has imported 5 years worth of agendas, minutes, videos. So you can go back 5 years to find past packets. If you go ahead and click on the year, any of these dates that are in bold is when a meeting took place. So you can click on that. It brings you right into those dates, and you can see that the meetings that took place during that month. Okay. You can also search by an individual committee. Okay, and then it'll bring up both the future and the past meetings. You can search by content. You can type in any combination of words, and you can bring up the packets that fulfill that content that you're searching for. All right. And now I'd like to show you the board portion of it. So the portion that I just showed you is for the public. There's also a portion of Civic Plus that committee members, council members can access packets and take notes right within the system, save those notes so that when you prepare for meetings that you have that available for you. So when you come into the Civic Plus website, you click on your initials and you go to board portal. And as you can see, it pulls up all the most current meetings with Common Council here being one of the ones in the front, and the more meetings in the past are further down. So if you click on one of the meetings, you can go into each individual item and take notes. And there's several different ways you can do this. You can go into it and you have here a staff memo that you can open up. You can take notes down here for any item that you want to take notes on. Okay. And then when you go ahead and save it, those notes will be in your packet for the next time when you come in and take a look at it. You can star packets and individual items, so it reminds you that you have information on that individual item. So that's how you can take a look at it on an individual basis. If you also wanted to just take a look at the agenda packet in full and take notes that way, you click on packet here, annotate file. Okay. And then if you click on annotate, you can do all kinds of things here. You can, they have arrows, you can insert a text box and then take notes here. And when you do click on any of these, you'll notice that another box opens on the right-hand side where you can give a little bit more details. Okay. You can also do the same thing if you wanted to just take a look at the agenda and make notes on the agenda. So if you do it this way, a lot of times it's easier because you have the entire packet available to you, and you can take notes on the entire packet instead of individual items. Okay. And the last thing that I wanted to show you too, there's all kinds of different things that you can use to make notes. You can make individual boxes if you need to, whatever it is you're going to be doing in your packet. When you save it, you come back in and everything's in your packet. Do you have any questions for me?
Personal notes, are they viewable to everyone else, or is that just comes up to your own personal?
So you'll log into your own Civic Plus account with your user and password. So everything that you put into the packets is only viewable for you.
But it is probably also a public record then.
I believe notes are not considered public.
By definition, private, personal notes for your own purposes are not a record by definition.
Okay. Yeah, well, it's good to clarify so everyone knows what the ground rules are. Once you annotate the file in your workspace in Civic Plus for the people up here, can you then download that edited document?
Yes. Yeah, there's a download option as well. And you can,
There was, but we just didn't go over it.
right. But the notes will remain there unless you delete the item. So it'll always be available for you.
Okay. Yeah, working from here during a meeting is a little cumbersome, but being able to download the file you annotated would be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, any questions? We're rapidly approaching the end of our meeting. I know we didn't save as much time for this as we had anticipated, but any questions for Carolyn while we've got her? We've got a couple minutes left. Okay. Thanks for the quick overview. That's all
Thank you, Mayor.
recorded, so you can go back and look up the video to see how to do it again. We'll move on. We just have one item left, the informational item regarding the Committee of the Whole planning calendar moving into 2026, so you can see the preview of coming attractions for early next year in there. And I don't know if anyone's got any comments on that. We've only got a minute left as well. Hearing and seeing no comments, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we're adjourned and we'll restart as the Common Council in 1 minute.